Okay.
Papers are a report on the conference of the Student Research Committee funded by trip for. The conference was called Psychedemia, which was aimed at the broader integration of altered states of consciousness into academia and into medicine. The conference covered both the theoretical and medical aspect of psychedelics. There were presentations on topics ranging from philosophy to neuroscience, psychiatry, and criminology, but my research was focused on the noted Christian theologian, philosopher, and mystic, Meister Eckhart. Using the classification of the shaman provided by Mircea Eliade, Meister Eckhart qualifies as a shaman. Eckhart experiences the essential classifications for a shaman. Eckhart's definition of the Son of God as a station that can be achieved through obliteration of his created nature is parallel to a shaman's final state of annihilation by the highest power in the pantheon. Now, first, what is the shaman? The shaman certainly has captured the fascination of many Westerners. It has generally romanticized the mystical and romanticized noble savage. This conception prevails in popular culture. An example of this is the popular MMORPG World of Warcraft, where a shaman is any one of a multitude of character classes. In academia, there is a dispute over what exactly constitutes a shaman. The view held by the most memorable and notable scholar of shamanism, Mircea Eliade, is that shamanism is a cross-cultural phenomenon with particular roots in Siberia and the Americas, various Pacific islands, and various Turkish nations, and influence permeating the yogis of India and the Sufis of Islam. The other opinion, which has been around since the term shaman was coined, is that the shaman is not any kind of universal phenomenon, but yet only something specified only with the Siberian people, and that the conception of a universal shamanism is false. And today, in modern academia, with a drive to crucify perennialist interpretations, the most popular interpretation is that the shaman is a made-up thing. Eliade classified the shaman as the bridge between the supernatural and natural world in what he considered archaic or primitive societies. And the shaman derives his powers by spiritual ascension. The routine generally begins with a trip to the underworld, involving temptations of the flesh, trials in the physical and spiritual world, and finally an inner spiritual journey where his spirit ascends and is destroyed and replaced by that of their highest God. The shaman serves a wide variety of functions besides mediating the supernatural world. The shaman is also generally very essential for leadership and a medical role in the community. The wearing and creation of masks and other costumes marks also a significant step for the development of a shaman. Among certain tribes, the shaman, during his underworld initiation, dresses in black and is tempted by the woman of the tribe. The symbolism of the color he wears generally portrays a very significant role, because sometimes it marks that he's either a white shaman or a right-hand shaman or a left-hand or evil shaman. The rainbow is of utmost significance to the shaman because of the association of the 7 colors of the rainbow. The shaman is said to climb to the 7 spheres of existence, and the shaman generally uses the drum to help him communicate with the supernatural world. When the shaman beats his drum, he is able to ride from one end of the rainbow to the other. This is symbolic of the shaman being brought to the center of the world. The center of the world, in most archaic societies, is symbolic of God being the center of all creation. Eliade noted the careful similarities between shamanism together with Buddhist Lamaism and the practice of yogis in India, as well as the Sufis of Islam. For example, in Tibet, monks engage in a very similar ritual that Siberian shamans engage in, that being the quest for their inner fire through mental discipline. They're able to heat up their body temperature in spite of the cold when they go out barely dressed and sit amongst frozen temperatures, yet are able to stay warm because of their control of their inner bodily functions. Another motif is the famed and mythical rope trick, which is practiced by both shamans and as well as Sufis, where it said that a shaman or Sufi can throw a rope into the air, climb up into the sky, and his body gets dismembered, and then he comes down a new person. Eliade claims that Eurasian shamanism at least began in Siberia and spread throughout the continent. And the point is, once again, the influence that shamanistic practices seem to have amongst the yogis and among the Sufis. And he also used the term shamanism to apply in cultures where there was not the term shaman, most predominantly in South America, where the Kamadaras, where the mystics of those people, of those tribes, have the parallel aspect of shamanism, that being his initiation into the supernatural world and using their initiatory powers to serve as a medicinal and leadership role within the community. Currently, there is a noted anthropologist named Michael Winkelmann who offers a neurological insight into shamanism, which helps augment Eliade's theory of shamanism as a universal phenomenon. Winkelmann explained that shamanism is essentially access to conventionally untapped areas of the human mind that were crucial for early stages of human brain development. He postulates that shamanism and religion, too for that matter, developed in the human mind earlier than human language. This explains why traditionally only a few in the modern era have the capability of actually becoming a shaman, and why in classical shamanistic cosmology everyone is a shaman at one point. Winkelmann argued that shamanism essentially unifies the various parts of the mind, and that as societies become more and more distant and apathetic towards spiritual ascension, the mind becomes more fragmented. Quote, shamanistic processes intensify connections between the limbic system and lower brain structures and project these integrated slow wave discharges into the frontal brain. These integrated dynamics enhance attention, self-awareness, learning, and memory, and also mechanisms, immediate self, attachment, motives, and feelings of conviction. Essentially, Winkelmann explains the human brain is consisted of a twin-united structure, that being a reptilian part of the brain, which is responsible mainly for a dream state, a paleomammalian part of the brain, which is responsible mainly for dance and play, and these other community, these kind of habits we find amongst hominids, amongst other mammals, and the neo-mammalian part of the brain, which is capable of complex and abstract thought. Winkelmann's thesis is that in early human development, back before the development of language, the humans had a much more awareness of their own consciousness because these three parts of the brain acted in much more harmony with one another. But as societies became agricultural and as furthermore progressed into more industrial, not post-industrial societies, the mind becomes ever more fragmented as one part of the brain, our neo-mammalian part of the brain, loses its connection to the paleomammalian part of the brain and the reptilian parts of the brain. And shamanism and religion is a way of maintaining this essential unity within the brain. Now, returning to the thesis of Meister Eckhart, who exactly was Meister Eckhart? The question is one which is puzzle both his admirers and his detractors. He is best described as a shaman in the medieval European cultural state. Through his theological writings, he's expressing the unification of his consciousness, the third person view of self, and the surrender to will, which is essential for that of a shaman. His view was expressed most clearly in his interpretation of the Son of God. He states that the Son of God is a position earned by the believer, and that Christ, the Son of God, is so much as the clearest example of a human being who achieved a state of pure realization. The Son of God described by Eckhart as the same thing as the shaman. From both these conditions, they have a unified consciousness. Eckhart does not only engage in the system of unified consciousness, he also engages in another essential practice of shamanism, which is the act of spiritual healing. In his treatise, primarily in his German works, he talks about the spiritual reasons for sickness and the means of curing them. Specifically, he focuses on the cure for psychological illness and depression. His spiritual cures were mainly focused on humbling the believer to accepting their condition of which God has ordained from them. Now, for the audience's pleasure, I will read a few quotes by Meister Eckhart, which reflect, quote, "The sun in its highest part corresponds to God in his most unfathomable depths, in his depths of humility. Yes, the humble man does not need to entreat, but he can indeed command. For the heights of divinity cannot look down, except for in the depths of humility. For the humble man and God are one and not two. End quote. Quote, what is life? God's being is my life. If my life is God's being, then God's existence must be my existence, and God's isness is my isness. Neither less nor more. End quote. Quote, he gives birth, me, his son, and the same son. I say more. He gives birth not only to me, his son, but he gives birth to me as himself, and himself as me, and to me as his being and nature, in the innermost source. There I spring out in the Holy Spirit, where there is one life and one being and one work. Everything God performs is one. Therefore he gives me his son birth without any distinction. My fleshly father is not my actual father, it's one literal portion of his nature. I am separated from him. He may be dead and I alive. Therefore my heavenly Father is truly my Father, for I am his son and have everything that I have from him. And I am his son, not a different one, because the Father performs one work. Therefore his work is me, his only begotten Son, without any difference. End quote. Quote, we should not falsely suppose that is by one son or image, that God is Christ is the Son of God, and by some other that the just and godlike man is the Son of God. For he says, we are being transformed to the same image. Furthermore, just as when many mirrors held up to a person's face and countenance are all informed by the same one face, so too each and every just person is completely and perfectly justified by the same justice. They are all formed, informed, and transformed to the same justice. It is worth noting, going back to the shamanistic symbolism of the rainbow, that Eckhart mentions seven clear levels of spiritual realization in which the individual elevates his consciousness to Christhood through a gradual process of clearing their souls and merging with God. And with considerations of Eckhart as a shaman, the thesis of Eliade and Winckelmann that shamanism is truly a cross-cultural phenomenon is defended. While within the human psyche is a drive for transcendence, that is, an attempt to escape the confines of our world of becoming, fast-paced change and limitation, and become one with absolute being, that is to say, perfection, uniform, and limitless. On a concluding note, I would like to thank my mentor, Mary McDonald, for her constant guidance over these years, which made this project possible. I'd also like to thank the Student Research Committee, in particular, for funding my trip to psychedemia. Thank you.
I'm going to allow us to stay an official 8 to 9 minutes behind, which is fine. I'd like to give people an opportunity to ask questions.
One question is, could it be that Eckhart's shamanism was taken from Siberian influences, such that it's a neo-shamanism of sorts? I guess you'd call it.
Well, that is certainly possible. We have, of course, Eliade's thesis of the spread influence of shamanism as far down south as places like Afghanistan and southern India and Turkestan. And Eliade also mentions the pre-European shamanism amongst the Norse people. So it's possible that the Siberian shamanism did make an influence upon Eckhart, although I think it's worth noting that Eckhart, he doesn't cite, he cites in his work, he cites, of course, the Bible, he cites Plato and Aristotle and Islamic philosophers like Ghazali and Averroes, but he doesn't cite Siberian practices. But it's completely possible that his mystical, because Eckhart, of course, isn't, he's not a fluke within the Catholic tradition. There are examples of this kind of spiritual shamanism in Christianity and Catholicism going back to the time of Christ. So it's, of course, you have St. Augustine, you have St. Teresa, so it's possible that Eckhart's shamanism is traced back to Siberia.
One more question.
Sure. Thank you for your presentation. I thought it was really clear, so thank you very much. I have a question about Eliada as shaman. And so shamans achieve a kind of gnosis, I would say. I would use that word. And Eckhart also achieves that very similar kind of gnosis, and that much I agree with. It seems to me that when you're looking at Eliada's definition of shamanism, which you presented clearly, and certainly is my understanding of shamanism, that gnosis is very specifically achieved through a series of corporal practices that you described, ritual practices, dressing, or different kinds of initiations, different things the body does. Occasionally psychotropics, more often different kinds of rituals. So to me that seems essential to what a shaman does. So do we have evidence of those kinds of ritual practices that Eckhart engaged with, or did you look at any way in the kinds of corporal practices that he used to achieve that state of gnosis?
That's an interesting question. Well, of course, Eliade did mention physical practices which the shaman has to go through either in South America or in Siberia or in places like Alaska, and it's generally the emphasis is on leaving the community for a certain amount of time. In Alaska, generally caves are often involved. The shaman has to go to pitch black caves in the middle of the night, and those who find the caves are passed on to the next level. Those who don't. And of course, there's no. At least I haven't seen any evidence of Eckhart ever going out in the middle of the night to find a cave. But I think it is worth noting that when Eckhart talks about the necessity of becoming Christ-like and becoming a son of God, he has to live like Christ. He has to. So in that sense, there's the corporeal, trials of shamanism, where he says, where he makes emphasis that on the blessedness of living an impoverished life. And he wrote clearly about how these who are poor, these who are suffering, they're the only ones who can truly achieve this state of Christhood, because Christ lived in poverty, and Christ said, you must take up your cross and follow me. And so in that sense, we do have the corporeality of Eckhart saying we have to live like Christ in that impoverished condition.
That's a great answer. Thank you.